Hi, my name is Afreen Bhumgara and this is my final project piece for CS 396. The aim of my project is to assess the interconnectedness, applicability, and ethical implications of cognitive neuroscience paired with AI. The project explores how AI versus human learning occurs that enables our current AI systems to perform tasks similar to the human brain and the ethical considerations and constraints of the interconnectedness of these fields. My target audiences for this project are the general, educational, and scientific audiences with an interest in computational and cognitive neuroscience, the human brain, computer science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and the ethical implications and constraints of the intersections of these domains. However, I do want to note that my target audience has a particular bias, and that is someone with a basic understanding of computer science, cognitive neuroscience, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, or a generalized tech background will quickly understand and consume the topic compared to someone with a non-technical background. The structure of my project video is as follows. First, we dive into the significance and the interconnectedness of neuroscience and AI and how they drive each other. We then talk about the real-life examples of the impacts of these domain intersections. We speak a little bit about the history of neuroscience and AI, current and contemporary neuroscience and AI, and the future implications and ethical constraints of neuroscience and AI. So, to begin with, as we all know, our human mind is an extremely complex and powerful tool. And for the first time in the history of the universe, or at least as we know it, harnessing technology has enabled a species to come extremely close to fully cultivating and exploiting the power of the human brain. The human brain is arguably still the only example that we have of something that approximates the kind of intelligence we're trying to build. And so it seems like a good idea to pay some attention to how the human mind works. Recent progresses and advances in AI have been remarkable. Artificial systems now outperform expert humans at Atari video games, the ancient board game Go, and high-stakes matches of heads-up poker. They can also produce handwriting and speech indistinguishable from those of humans, translate between multiple languages, and even reformat your holiday snaps in the style of Van Gogh masterpieces. These advances are attributed to several factors, including the application of new statistical approaches and the increased processing power and computing power of computers. But one often overlooked contribution is the use of ideas from experimental and theoretical neuroscience. Psychology and neuroscience have played a key role in the history of AI. Founding figures such as Hebb, McCullough, Minsky, and Hinton were all originally motivated by a deep desire to understand how the brain worked. In fact, throughout the late 20th century, much of the key work developing neural networks took place not in maths or physics labs, but in psychology and neurophysiology departments. The history of artificial intelligence is inextricably intertwined with the history of neuroscience. Since the early days of AI, scientists turned to the human brain as a source of guidance for the development of intelligent machines. Unsurprisingly, many pioneers of AI, such as Warren McCullough, were trained in the sciences of the brain. Modern AI borrowed most of its vocabulary from neurology and psychology. For instance, computational models consisting of networks of interconnected units, one of the most common approaches to AI, are called artificial neural networks or ANNs. Each unit is called an artificial neuron. Several areas of research in AI are labeled through neuropsychological categories such as computer vision, machine learning, natural language processing. It's not just a matter of terminology. ANNs, for example, are actually inspired by and based on the functioning of biological neural networks that constitute animal nervous systems. Neuroscience has played a key role in the history of artificial intelligence and has been an inspiration for building human-like AI. There are two ways that neuroscience inspires us to design AI systems. One, that emulates human intelligence, and two, to build neural networks that mimic brain structure. However, despite their biological inspiration and performance achievements, these artificially intelligent systems differ from human intelligence in crucial ways. For a machine to learn or think like a person, it would need to be able to explain and understand problems, learning to learn for acquiring knowledge, and generalize knowledge to new tasks and situations. Like a human brain, the machine learning neural network also consists of interconnected neurons. When a neuron receives inputs, it gets activated and it sends information to other neurons. An artificial neuron is then a mathematical function that is conceived as a model of biological neurons. Our brain's plasticity allows us to learn and improve our skills. Every time we learn new things, we are creating and strengthening the connections between neurons. That's why when we practice a task, we become better at it. Similarly, a neural network learns when we feed it with lots of data. Each connection on the neural network is associated with a weight that dictates the importance between neurons. During the training process, the weights are tuned accordingly to strengthen or weaken the connection between these neurons. For instance, when we look at a picture of a cat, we know that it is a cat because we have seen enough cats in our lives. Likewise, if we provide our neural networks with enough cat images, it will begin to recognize cats. So why is neuroscience the foundation for AI and vice versa? First, neuroscience can help validate AI techniques that already exist. Simply put, if we discover one of our artificial algorithms mimics a function within the brain, it suggests our approach may be on the right track. Second, neuroscience can provide a rich source of inspiration for new types of algorithms and architectures to employ when building artificial brains. Traditional approaches to AI have historically been dominated by logic-based methods and theoretical mathematical models. Neuroscience can complement these by identifying classes of biological computation that may be critical to cognitive function. And neuroscience can also benefit from AI research. Take the example of reinforcement learning, one of the central approaches in contemporary AI research. Although the original idea came from theories of animal learning and psychology, it was developed and elaborated by machine learning researchers. These ideas were later fed back into neuroscience to help us understand neurophysiology phenomena, such as the firing properties of dopamine neurons. So all of this helps us understand how our brain works. Neuroscientists are researching how human brain processes thoughts and how these thoughts move our bodies. By knowing more about the brain, we are equipped to better diagnose mental diseases and enable people with disabilities to improve movement capabilities. For instance, neuroscientist Chetan Pandrinath wants to enable people with paralyzed limbs to reach out and grasp with a robotic arm as naturally as they would with their own. To help him meet this goal, he has collected recordings of brain activity in people with paralysis. His hope, which is shared by many other researchers, is that he will be able to identify the patterns of electrical activity in neurons that correspond to a person's attempts to move their arm in a particular way, so that the instruction can then be fed to a prosthesis. Essentially, he wants to read people's minds. However, these signals from the brain They're really complicated. In search of help, neuroscientists such as Chetan turn to artificial intelligence. Chetan feeds his brain activity recordings to an artificial neural network, an ANN, a computer architecture that is inspired by the brain, and tasked it with learning how to reproduce the data. His work is just one example of the growing interaction between AI and cognitive science. AI, with its ability to identify patterns in large, complex data sets, has seen remarkable successes in the past decade, in part by emulating how the brain performs certain computations, and has largely enabled mankind and the human species to move forward in our conquest for exploration and innovation. The significance of our growth as a species can be subjectively measured just through our creation of artificially intelligent software. Now, cognitive science is beginning to benefit from the power of AI, both as a model for developing and testing ideas about how the brain performs computations and as a tool for processing the complex data sets for scientists. In another example, in a research conducted at Brown University, two people with tetraplegia, that is, two people who were unable to move their arms or their legs in any functional useful way, were able to control a prosthetic or a robotic arm simply by thinking about the movement of their own paralyzed hand. And they did that using the investigational brain-gate neural interface system. They thought about using their own arm and hand as though they were reaching out themselves with their own limb, and the robotic arm moved much the way their own arm would have moved. One participant reached out with the robotic arm. She thought about the use of her own hand. She picked up a thermos of coffee, brought it close to her, tilted it towards herself, and sipped the coffee from a straw. That was the first time in nearly 15 years that she had picked up anything and was able to drink from it solely of her own volition. This was a moment of true joy, true happiness. Beyond the fact that it was an accomplishment, it was an important. As AI enables neuroscientists to obtain further insights into how computation works in the brain, the effort might lead to machines that can take on more human-like intelligence, making AI and human intelligence a cycle of mutual reinforcement. Machine learning and cognitive science are then two sides of the same coin. In one case, we ask how to solve a problem mathematically so that it can be implemented efficiently in a machine, and in the other case, we look at the sole existing proof that it can be solved, which is the brain. AI techniques come in handy not just for making models and generating ideas, but as a tool for handling data. Neural and brain data are terribly complicated, and using machine learning techniques allows for structure. ML's main strength lies in recognizing patterns that might be too subtle or too buried in huge data sets. Now that we know why AI and neuroscience relate and how they drive and validate each other, let's delve more into the history of AI and neuroscience. At the dawn of the computer age, AI research and neuroscience were completely intertwined. Early pioneers straddled both fields, and the collaborations between disciplines were highly productive. To elaborate further, let's bring up a few examples that describe the history and interconnectedness of AI and neuroscience. So, Alan Turing, a mathematician and computer scientist, invented the Turing test and in a lot of ways is known as the father of computer science. The idea behind the Turing test was to check whether a human can distinguish if he is talking to a human or a machine, and if he is unable to make the distinction, then the computer has passed the Turing test. Turing quoted, "We are not interested in the fact that the brain has the consistency of cold porridge." In fact, he was very interested in how the human brain worked and said that the key to understanding the brain is not in mapping its anatomy or measuring its density, but in characterizing its behavior mathematically. his view is still shared by many. Mathematical equations are expressive and unambiguous, and arguably the only language suited to describe so complex an object. Turing wrote a short computer program at the University of Manchester that accepted a single number, performed a series of unspecified calculations on it, and returned a second number. He argued that the brain accepted tens of thousands of inputs from sensory receptors around the body, but the calculations these inputs undergo are far more complicated than anything written by a single programmer. He underscored his argument with a wager that it would take an investigator at least 1,000 years to guess the full set of calculations his Manchester program employed. Guessing the full set of calculations taking place in the brain, he noted, would appear prohibitively time-consuming. With modern supercomputers and neuroimaging techniques, however, we have reduced the complexity of the orders of magnitude. McCulloch and Pitts invented the model of the single neuron. They wanted to create some sort of mathematical model that represented how a neuron works. And this was a very basic model. The model takes some inputs, applies a function to create an output that is a single integer. This is very similar to what a neuron does. It accepts input signals, processes these signals, and outputs a signal that propagates to other neurons and creates a neural network of these neurons. Both McCulloch and Pitt tried to understand how the brain could produce highly complex patterns by using many basic cells that are connected together. Hinton observed that we have layers of neurons and wanted to optimize these neurons so that they can effectively complete their objective right. Hinton created the backpropagation technique, which takes the output prediction and computes the error value based on the error label. A gradient is then computed that specifies the numerical quantity by which the weights of the network have to be updated incrementally backwards in the reverse direction as we forward propagated the input data. Hinton was also a huge proponent of neuroscience techniques such as dropout turning neurons on and off randomly to increase the generalization ability of a network of nonlinearities and to allow a network to learn both linear and nonlinear functions, along with other neuroscience mechanisms of hierarchical and layered networks applied to neural networks in machine learning. Hinton's motivation for backpropagation was to train a multi-layered neural network such that it could learn the appropriate internal representations to allow it to learn any arbitrary mapping of input to output. All of this leads us to the problem that if we were to study machine learning and artificial intelligence now, and learn about the different types of models, classifiers, and algorithms, such as support vector machines, random forests, decision trees, the underlying implication that the foundations of these machine learning concepts are actually based on neuroscience research is not clear. More recently, the interaction between neuroscience and artificial intelligence has become much less common. Both subjects have grown enormously in complexity, and disciplinary boundaries have solidified. This is a problem. The human brain is the only existing proof that such an intelligence is even possible. Neuroscience can also provide validation of artificial intelligence techniques that already exist. Neuroscience provides a rich source of inspiration for new types of algorithms and architectures, independent of and complementary to the mathematical and logic-based methods and ideas that have largely dominated traditional approaches to AI. Marr describes a biological system in three different parts: the implementation, which is the hardware, the algorithmic part, which is the software, and the computational part, which is why do things work the way they do. We need a systems neuroscience level understanding of the brain, namely the algorithms, architectures, functions, and representations it utilizes. By focusing on the computational and algorithmic levels, we can gain transferable insights in the general mechanisms of brain function, while also leaving room to accommodate the distinctive opportunities and challenges that arise when building intelligent machines. We now move to contemporary neuroscience and how it's played into AI. Currently, there exist four key areas in AI that have been affected and impacted by contemporary neuroscience. The first is attention. So, the brain does not learn by implementing a single global optimization principle within a uniform and undifferentiated neural network. We do not have giant recurrent networks, but instead work with different modules in our brain that are good for different purposes. When talking about machine learning, one brain module could be doing something like a Hopfield network, another an LSTM network, another a self-organizing map, and so on. So the brain does not learn with a single optimization principle. Rather, biological brains are modular with distinct but interacting subsystems, underpinning key functions such as memory, language, and cognitive control. Consider convolutional networks in particular, which are networks that are good for working with images. They work directly on entire images or video frames with equal priority given to all the image pixels. But we learned that the primate visual system works differently, and rather than processing all the inputs in a parallel visual attention, we shift our attention strategically among locations and objects, centering processing resources and representational coordinates on a series of regions. Therefore, recent AI discoveries have implemented this idea of an attention mechanism, of focusing on the parts that are more specific. And because this attention mechanism has weights that are updated via the gradient descent over time, and so there are differentiable weights, the network learns where to best focus its attention on whatever the input data is as it updates it over time. And so we can really see how neuroscience research has inspired recent AI discoveries. Another key area is episodic memory. The difference between semantic and episodic memory is that semantic memory is very concrete. For instance, our knowledge of what an apple or our bed is, whereas episodic memory is more continuous. Episodic memory relates to an event that has happened in the past, and we have both kinds of memory. And this is one of the canonical themes in neuroscience, that our intelligent behavior relies on multiple memory systems and not just one type of memory. Recently, DeepMind created a deep Q learning algorithm inspired by this very idea of episodic memory, and that used experience replay. And I've also shared the pseudocode for that. During the training process, the agent selects an action from some probability distribution. On executing that action, the model gets a reward, and then it stores that transition inside of the episodic memory and performs grading descent to update its weight. It repeats this every time it reads, and it is sampling not just from this random distribution, but also from the episodic memory that it stored over time. DeepMind's DeepQ network used experience replay, where the network stores a subset of the training data in an instance-based way and then replays it offline. It learns anew from successes or failures that occurred in the past. Experience replay is critical to maximizing data efficiency, destabilizing effects of learning from consecutive correlated experiences, and allowing the network to learn a viable value function even in complex, highly structured sequential environments such as video games. And this was actually critical to the success of 16 or more different Atari games that employ the same algorithm, which is incredible. DeepMind's DeepQ network uses experience replay, where the network stores a subset of the training data in an instance-based way and then replays it offline. It learns anew from successes or failures that occurred in the past. Experience replay is critical to maximizing data efficiency, destabilizing effects of learning, and allowing the network to learn a viable value function even in a complex and highly structured sequential environment such as video games. The next is working memory. Similar to episodic memory, we know from neuroscience that we can maintain and manipulate information with an active store known as working memory. So, one that we've implemented in AI is through the idea of long short term memory or LSTM. Human intelligence can manipulate information with this active store of working memory. And this is thought to be instantiated within the prefrontal cortex and interconnected areas. Classic theories suggest that this depends on interactions between a central controller and separate domain-specific memory buffers. LSTM networks are one step towards implementing this. In LSTMs, the function of sequence control and memory storage are closely intertwined. But this contrasts with classic models of human working memory, which separate these two. So, the last thing from contemporary neuroscience and AI is continual learning. Intelligence agents must be able to learn and remember many different tasks that are encountered over multiple time scales. Continual learning is an ability to master new tasks without forgetting how to perform prior tasks. We are constantly learning things. However, a problem in neural networks is called catastrophic forgetting, where if we take a neural network and we ask it to learn how to do X or whatever an objective is, and then we take the same neural network and we say, okay, now learn how to do Y, and whatever it's learning for the second training iteration is going to override the weights it learned for the first training iteration. While animals appear relatively adept at continual learning, neural networks suffer from the problem of catastrophic forgetting. This occurs as the network parameters shift towards the optimal state for performing the second of the two successive tasks, overwriting the configuration that allowed it to perform the first task. Advanced neuroimaging techniques such as the two-photon imaging now allow dynamic visualizations, and this approach can be used to employ continual learning. In our human brain, there is this synaptic consolidation where connections between neurons are less likely to be overridden if they have been important in previously learned tasks. So one way to prevent that in machine learning and artificial intelligence is elastic weight consolidation. Here, elastic weight consolidation is one newer step in this direction, and it acts by slowing down learning in a subset of network weights identified as important to previous tasks, thereby anchoring these parameters to previously found solutions. This allows multiple tasks to be learned with an increase in network capacity, with weight shared efficiently between tasks, and with a more efficient structure. So we're now going to talk about the future and the areas that this integration of artificial intelligence and neuroscience will transform and improve. The advent of new tools for brain imaging and genetic bioengineering have begun to offer a detailed characterization of the computations occurring in neural circuits. And this has begun to revolutionize our understanding of mammalian brain function. So, the first area is understanding physical reality. Human infants have knowledge of core concepts relating to the physical world, such as space, number, objectness, which allows them to construct compositional mental models that can guide inference and prediction. Novel neural network architectures have been developed that interpret and reason about scenes in a human-like way by decomposing them into individual objects and their relations. Deep RL has been used to capture the processes by which children gain common sense understanding of the world through interactive experiences. So, the next area is efficient learning. And human cognition is distinguished by its ability to rapidly learn about new concepts from only a handful of examples. But sometimes we have to feed neural networks hundreds to thousands to millions of input samples and images or data for them to actually learn. And for them to be efficient learners, we would have to build a metadata repository. The next area is transfer learning. So humans excel at generalizing or transferring generalized knowledge gained in one context to novel, previously unseen domains. One recent report made the very interesting claim that neural codes thought to be important in the representation of map-like spaces might be critical for abstract reasoning in more general domains. To train a neural network, we sometimes need to provide thousands to millions of images for a single classification. And arguably, this is not how the human intelligence or the human mind works. Using the same neural network to apply what it's learned from some previous task to a new task is transfer. On the same line of thought, an outstanding question is whether some aspects of intelligence are installed by evolution. For instance, people seem to be predisposed to recognizing a face as a face. Babies can do so from the first hours of life. Deciphering whether that idea is correct could enable computer scientists to work out one way to help machines to learn. And researchers are studying the neural basis of morality. People are afraid of evil machines. So we probably better know how our moral behavior arises if we want to build good and ethical machines. The next area is imagination and planning. So despite their strong performance on goal-directed tasks, deep reinforcement learning systems such as DQN operate mostly in a reactive way, learning the mapping from perceptual input actions to maximize the future value. And there are two major drawbacks with this. It is relatively data inefficient, requiring large amounts of experience to derive accurate estimates, and it is inflexible, being insensitive to changes in the value of outcomes. This is the I2A architecture by DeepMind. The idea is that it's using the external module for imagination, and in a single rollout, it's making these predictions. And for neuroscience and AI, the idea of imagination is going to be very important in the future, and we can learn a lot about how this works by looking at how humans plan out and simulate actions in their head before they actually execute these actions. By contrast, humans can more flexibly select actions based on forecast of long future outcomes through simulation-based planning, which uses predictions generated from an internal model of the environment learned through experience. AI research will benefit from a close reading of the related literature on how humans imagine possible scenarios, envision the future, and carry out simulation-based planning and functions that depend on a common neural substrate in the hippocampus. Research into the human imagination emphasizes its constructive nature, with humans able to construct fictitious mental scenarios by recombining familiar elements in novel ways. necessitating compositional disentangled representations of the form present in certain generative models. The next area is virtual brain analytics. So, because of their complexity, the products of AI research often remain black boxes. We understand only poorly the nature of the computations that occur or representations that are formed during learning of complex tasks. But by applying tools from neuroscience to AI systems, synthetic equivalents of single cell recordings, neuroimaging, and lesion techniques, we can gain insights into the key drivers of successful learning in AI research and increase the interpretability of these systems, that is, virtual brain analytics. Visualizing brain states through dimensionality reduction is commonplace in neuroscience and can be applied more in AI research. It is important as complexity of neural architecture increases. In spite of the intimate link between AI and neuroscience, ethical reflections on these two disciplines have developed quite independently of each other and with little interaction between the two research communities. On the one hand, the AI ethics community has focused primarily on issues such as robot rights, algorithmic transparency, biases in AI systems, and autonomous weapons. On the other hand, the neuroethics community has primarily focused on issues such as pharmacological enhancement, brain interventions, neuroimaging, and free will. However, in the face of recent technological developments, these two communities can no longer afford to operate in silos. Several ethically sensitive developments are occurring at the interface between neuroscience and artificial intelligence. Today, we are the agents of our own actions, meaning we are in control. But technologies that alter our brain activity have the potential to blur that line. The point is that as technology progresses, we need to make sure that legal and ethical guidelines keep pace. Today's biggest tech companies collect huge amounts of personal information because they can sell it for commercial gain. This means that if or when your brain activity can be recorded with a wearable EEG headsets, companies would find huge value in accessing your brain-based information. Imagine in the future if you merely thought about buying a new smart TV while wearing an EEG headset and that information was relayed to a big online retailer. The retailer could use AI programs to automatically contact you with their latest specials on smart TVs. You wouldn't even have to act out on your thoughts by typing it into a search engine. Your head-mounted device would record the activity pattern caused by thinking smart TV, and commercial operators could act. There are huge privacy concerns around who should have access to your brain activity. For example, what if a health insurance company wanted to buy your brain activity, which could indicate if you have a mental health disorder? These are important issues to consider as technology improves and brain data becomes more readily available. This back and forth is essential if both fields are to continue to build on each other's insights, creating a virtuous circle where AI researchers use ideas from neuroscience to build new technology, and neuroscientists learn from the behavior of artificial agents to better interpret biological brains. Distilling intelligence into algorithms and comparing them to the human brain is now vital. Not only could it bolster our quest to develop AI, a tool that we hope will create new knowledge and push forward scientific discovery, but may also allow us to better understand what's going on inside our own heads. That could shed some light on some of the most enduring mysteries in neuroscience, such as the nature of creativity, dreams, and perhaps one day even consciousness. With so much at stake, the need for the field of neuroscience and AI to come together is more urgent than ever before. Thank you so much. I hope you found this video useful. I hope it helped you understand the significance of neuroscience and AI and how they drive each other. I hope you were able to understand how AI and neuroscience have transformed real life problems into tangible solutions, the history of neuroscience and AI, contemporary neuroscience and AI, along with the future of neuroscience and AI and some ethical constraints and implications of the field. Thank you.